Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, the Select Committee has now conducted over 800 interviews and depositions of witnesses who have knowledge of the events of January 6th. This includes more than a dozen former Trump White House staff members. So, Mr. Speaker, when you hear my colleagues make political, partisan attacks on the Select Committee, I hope that all of us can remember some basic facts. Through these interviews, we have learned that President Trump and his team were warned in advance and repeatedly that the efforts they undertook to overturn the 2020 election would violate the law and our Constitution. They were warned that January 6th could and likely would turn violent. And they were told repeatedly by our state and federal courts, by our Justice Department, and by agencies of our intelligence community that the allegations of widespread fraud sufficient to overturn an election were false and were unsupported by the evidence. And yet, despite all of these specific warnings, President Trump and his team moved willfully through multiple means to attempt to halt the peaceful transfer of power, to halt the constitutional process for counting votes, and to shatter the constitutional bedrock of our great nation. As a federal judge has recently concluded, the illegality of President Trump's plan for January 6th was, quote, obvious. We're here today to address two specific witnesses who have refused to appear for testimony before the committee. The committee has many questions for Mr. Scavino about his political social media work for President Trump, including his interactions with an online forum called the Donald.win and with QAnon, a bizarre and dangerous cult. Mr. Scavino worked directly with President Trump to spread President Trump's false message that the election was stolen and to recruit Americans to come to Washington on January 6th to, quote, take back their country. This effort to deceive was widely effective and widely destructive. And Donald Trump's stolen election campaign succeeded in provoking the violence on January 6th. On this point, there's no doubt. The committee has videos, interviews, and sworn statements from violent rioters demonstrating these facts. Mr. Navarro will also be a key witness. He has written a book boasting about his role in planning and coordinating the activity of January 6th. We have many questions for Mr. Navarro, including about his communications with Roger Stone and Steve Bannon regarding the planning for January 6th. And as Judge Carter recently concluded, quote, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that President Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021. In the case of both of these witnesses, Mr. Speaker, the committee would rather have their testimony than have to move this contempt citation. When you hear my colleagues attack the Select Committee, remember, Mr. Scavino and Mr. Navarro have chosen not to appear. They did not have to make this choice, but they did. In America, no one is above the law. Neither Mr. Trump, nor Mr. Scavino, nor Mr. Navarro is some form of royalty. There is no such thing in America as the privileges of the crown. Every citizen has a duty to comply with a subpoena. And Mr. Speaker, when you hear my colleagues challenge the committee's legislative purpose, remember, the D.C. Circuit and the Supreme Court of the United States have affirmed our legislative purpose. Too many Republicans are once again ignoring the rulings of the courts, as many of them did in the run-up to January 6th. Mr. Speaker, the tale of what happened following the 2020 election, resulting in the violence of January 6th, is a tale of stunning deceit. It is a tale of lies about our election and contempt for the rulings of our courts. The election claims made by Donald Trump were so frivolous and so unfounded that the president's lead lawyer did not just lose these cases, he lost his license to practice law. The New York Supreme Court found, quote, "There is uncontroverted evidence that Mr. Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump and the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020. Mr. Speaker, those in this chamber who continue to embrace the former president and his dangerous and destructive lies ought to take a good, hard look at themselves. At a moment of real danger to our republic, when the need for fidelity to our Constitution is paramount, they have abandoned their oaths in order to perform for Donald Trump. That will be their legacy. Madam Chair, this is not a close call. Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino have chosen not to comply with a congressional subpoena. They are in contempt. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady.